Today's story is about a man who, with the help of nothing more than a printer, shook the entire financial foundation of a country. The most surprising part: he never used violence, nor did he ever take anyone's life. And yet, he built a criminal empire so vast that neither the police nor the people living around him had any idea. This man was a master in one particular art. He could replicate anything with astonishing accuracy. And that very skill led him to create the best counterfeit notes Canada had ever seen, notes so flawless that detecting them or catching the culprit was nearly impossible. These fake notes were crafted with such precision that even note detector machines, and banks themselves, could not tell the difference. So who was this man? How did he manage to print $2 million worth of fake currency while sitting in a single room? And what was the one mistake that finally brought him into the hands of the police? What you're about to hear will leave you shocked. The art of counterfeiting has often been called an ancient craft because it has existed ever since currency was invented. Before paper money, people used gold and silver coins for transactions, and even in those times, counterfeiters would use different metals to make identical fake coins. Paper currency was first invented in the 13th century in China. The paper used for this currency was made from the wood of the mulberry tree, and that is why the Chinese government kept a strict watch on mulberry trees. The punishment for making fake notes was death. Yet, despite such harsh laws, counterfeiting never stopped. It spread from Asia to Europe, and by the 18th and 19th centuries, many locals in England were producing fake notes and selling them wholesale to Irish people, who then circulated them all over England. Along with China and England, America was also a country badly struggling with counterfeit currency. By the 19th century, more than half of the notes circulating in the United States were fake. Most of the people producing these fake dollars had set up their operations in cities like Quebec and Ontario, close to the US-Canada border. This proximity made it easy for them to smuggle counterfeit dollars into America. Among these people was a man named Joseph Bagdasarian, who had smuggled nearly $15 million in fake notes into the US during the 1990s. He became an inspiration for the mastermind of our story, the man who was compelled to step into the world of counterfeiting. The mastermind's name was Weber Wesley, born in 1974 in Ontario, Canada. Weber's childhood was much like any other child's. His parents raised him with love and affection, but Weber was deeply fascinated by computers from an early age, a passion that would later change his life forever. In school, Weber was quiet and reserved. He didn't have many friends, nor did other students interact much with him. Feeling isolated, Weber decided to do something that would make people notice him. Together with a friend, he planned a robbery at their own school. The reason behind the robbery was simple: Weber wanted to make a name for himself and grab people's attention. And things turned out exactly as he had imagined. After the heist, every news channel and newspaper reported that two schoolboys had carried out a robbery in their own school, stealing nearly $70,000 worth of equipment. This incident brought a sudden twist to Weber's life. People began to recognize him, and everyone was talking about him. Although Weber had committed the robbery just to gain attention, he had no idea that this was the beginning of a criminal journey he had never imagined. Weber and his friend decided to hide the stolen equipment, but during this time, they were caught by the police. Both were sent to a juvenile detention center for 1 year. During questioning, the police also asked about the stolen equipment, but they refused to reveal anything. After completing a year in detention, they sold the equipment and divided the money between them. Having earned a decent sum from selling the stolen goods, and having already spent a year in detention because of the robbery, Weber decided he would choose the path of crime and make a fortune. And so began the journey that would turn him into the king of counterfeit notes. Because Weber was skilled at replicating anything, he first began by forging official documents such as checks and insurance certificates, selling them for profit. But in 1997, he was caught and sentenced to 3 months in jail. After being released, he turned to small thefts and even started supplying marijuana. But once again, he was caught and sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. Weber's ambitions kept growing, and he desperately wanted to make a lot of money, quickly and discreetly. During this period of confusion and planning, an idea struck him, an idea that would change his life forever. Weber decided to start printing counterfeit notes himself. Since he was passionate about computers and printers, the time had come to put his skills and knowledge to use to earn limitless wealth. Although Weber began with $10 and $20 notes, he soon decided to make fake copies of the larger $100 bills. At first, the counterfeit $100 notes he produced were far from perfect. Anyone could tell they were fake. Weber realized that if he wanted to create a flawless counterfeit and live the life of his dreams, he needed to understand every tiny detail of a real note and correct every flaw in his own. And that's exactly what he did. He began scanning his counterfeit notes carefully to identify his mistakes. It was then that he noticed two missing features found in genuine notes. The first was the shine. Genuine notes didn't glow under UV light, but his counterfeits did. The second flaw was the security thread. Unlike real notes, his lacked polymer dots and didn't change color. Eventually, Weber found a solution, which you'll learn about as the story continues. He knew he needed the right paper, the right ink, and the right foil to create the perfect note. So, he began contacting various vendors in Canada and the US. After days of research, Weber managed to acquire all the raw materials needed to produce flawless bills. He decided to print them using his inkjet printer, which could create sharper, higher quality copies than other machines. But Weber also understood he couldn't do everything alone. To produce the quantity of counterfeit notes he envisioned, he needed a trusted team. He brought 3 people on board. Dustin Chasm, whose job was to check every note under UV light for details and flaws. Ryan Dare, responsible for coding the notes so they looked and felt authentic. Anthony Cabral, who oversaw and supervised the entire operation. With his capable team and raw materials in place, Weber was ready to produce counterfeit notes the likes of which Canadian authorities had never seen. Yet the task wasn't easy. Weber and his team first drafted a blueprint of the $100 bill, replicating every detail on both sides of the note. Creating a perfect $100 bill was extremely complicated because even the smallest detail could get them caught. It was vital to produce a note that could pass in supermarkets and fool detection machines. They worked on brightness, sharpness, color, and even the images printed on the note to make it look exactly like the real thing. After many sleepless nights, they finally created a design that perfectly resembled a genuine $100 bill. However, Weber pointed out that there was still one flaw: the security thread. On genuine notes, the thread changed color under UV rays, while the thread in their counterfeit bills remained the same. Replicating this security feature was a huge challenge. And because they were involved in illegal activity, they couldn't seek anyone's help. So Weber came up with a clever plan. He contacted several paper manufacturers, introducing himself as the CEO of a company called Pro Custom Graphics. He explained that he needed special foil paper for one of his projects. Weber's persuasion was so smooth that the manufacturers agreed to sell him the foil paper. Now, he finally had the last piece of material needed to make the perfect note. All that remained was to cut the foil paper into strips, replicating the exact size and placement of the security thread found in real notes. Since the foil paper changed color under UV light, it perfectly mimicked the genuine security feature. With all raw materials and their design ready, Weber and his team began printing counterfeit notes. The bills were so masterfully crafted that distinguishing them from real currency became impossible. And this is how they started selling the fake notes on a large scale, watching their profits grow day by day. The consequences of this illegal venture were yet to come. Even knowing everything, they continued printing counterfeit notes day and night because greed had blinded them, and they were enjoying making so much money. What had started as a small-scale operation had now turned into a business, and Weber and his team were earning an unimaginable amount of wealth. To make the whole operation even better, Weber bought advanced paper cutting machines and advanced software. And that was the reason they were now printing counterfeit notes worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in one go. Because every note circulating in the economy passes through many hands, it eventually becomes old and creased. But Weber's counterfeit bills were completely fresh and new. That's why Weber came up with yet another clever idea to give his fake bills a more authentic feel. This time, Weber put all the notes into a washing machine dryer along with poker chips and ran it for 11 minutes. As a result, all the counterfeit notes began to look slightly old and wrinkled, making it almost impossible to tell the difference between fake and real bills. After creating these perfect copies, Weber and his team began putting them into the market, and, most surprisingly, no one detected them. Weber and his team now believed they had created the perfect bill and that they would never get caught. But they were unaware that a single foolish mistake would lead them straight to jail. As Weber and his team continued printing, their lifestyle and spending habits became more and more lavish. They were now buying luxury cars, designer clothes, going on holiday trips, and living the life they had always dreamed of. Weber became so intoxicated by this new wealth that he started spending 10 to 12 hours a day shopping, buying every expensive thing he had ever wanted. Weber also loved luxury cars, and that's why he bought himself a Mang Cobra sports car, the very car that would later lead to his arrest. One day, Weber took this car to a garage because he wanted to customize it. And that was when he made the mistake that exposed the entire counterfeit operation. Although Weber had paid attention to every detail while making the notes, there were still many bills that carried the same serial numbers. When Weber paid cash for the car customization, those bills with identical serial numbers reached the garage dealer. When the dealer looked carefully at the notes, he noticed the repeating serial numbers. Right there, Weber's life and this story took a new turn. The garage dealer immediately reported the counterfeit money to the police, unaware that he had, by accident, just exposed Canada's biggest counterfeit currency racket. As soon as the police received the tip, they became alert and began their investigation. Very soon, Weber, who had remained invisible to everyone, was now on the police radar. They started keeping a close watch on him. The first and most important task for the police was to collect solid evidence against Weber and his team. That's why they began monitoring not only Weber but also his associates. But Weber and his crew got wind of this. To avoid police vehicles, they began driving their cars through different routes, and they kept changing their phone numbers so the police couldn't put their numbers under surveillance. Because Weber had already been to jail before, he was terrified of being sent back. Yet, despite the police keeping an eye on them, they didn't stop printing notes. Their fake bills were so good that demand kept increasing day by day, and so they continued their work tirelessly. Now Weber and his team felt confident that they had successfully outsmarted the police. Meanwhile, the authorities were preparing to catch them. By October 2000, the police had gathered enough evidence against Weber and his crew to arrest them easily. But because they wanted to catch them red-handed, they decided to wait for the perfect moment. After a few more days of surveillance, police saw Weber and his team members entering a building late at night. They suspected this was where the counterfeit bills were being produced. After waiting outside for a while, the officers raided the place. Inside, they were stunned. Counterfeit notes were scattered everywhere, and 2 team members were busy cutting the bills. The officers were completely shocked when they discovered that the room contained $25 million worth of fake notes, clear evidence that Weber's business was thriving and that he was making a huge amount of money. Weber and his entire team were caught because of their overconfidence. They had always believed they were fooling the police, completely unaware that law enforcement had been watching them all along, waiting for the right moment to grab them red-handed. After arresting everyone, the police finally breathed a sigh of relief. They took Weber and his team into custody and began interrogations, where they learned that Weber was the mastermind behind the whole racket, while the rest of the team was simply following his instructions. After spending a few weeks in custody, their trial began in court. Ryan, Dustin, and Anthony were sentenced to 2 years each, while Weber, as the mastermind of this counterfeit currency racket, was sentenced to 5 years in prison. News of Weber's arrest spread across Canada like wildfire. People were shocked, but they also breathed a sigh of relief because Weber's arrest meant the entire operation had finally been shut down. The police seized not only $2 million worth of counterfeit bills from Weber's house but also all the equipment and materials used to make them. Even after going to jail, Weber's mindset didn't change. Inside prison, he kept thinking day and night about how to make more money as quickly as possible, even if it meant doing something illegal again. After serving his 5-year sentence, Weber was released in August 2006 and started selling fish in Ontario. It was strange, the man who once printed counterfeit notes for himself was now running a fish-selling business. But because the business didn't succeed, Weber shut it down. He then decided to try his hand at stock trading, believing it was the only way left to make big money. After a few days of research, he found a financial firm called Gold Bridge Financial Incorporation. One of the firm's unique aspects was that it offered financial services without requiring registration. Through this firm, Weber opened his own digital currency company, putting it in the name of his wife, Michelle Cam. He called the company Encrypt Tux, which dealt with cryptocurrency trading and offered financial advisory services. Weber knew very well that he had several criminal records attached to his name. If he offered financial advice under his own identity, he would be caught. That's why he opened the company in Michelle Cam's name, allowing him to trade cryptocurrencies and provide advisory services to customers under her cover. However, Weber's cleverness didn't last long. By 2011, the Ontario Securities Commission discovered that Weber was involved in financial advisory and crypto trading, a clear violation of their rules. As a result, Weber was banned from trading and financial advisory, sentenced to 3 months in jail, and ordered to remain under supervision for 1 year. As I told you earlier, Weber had previously gone to jail for supplying marijuana. After the supervision ended, he decided to return to selling cannabis. By 2018, Canada had passed a law called the Cannabis Act, which legalized marijuana for medicinal and other purposes. This time, Weber leased land and began growing marijuana himself. He opened a store under the Cannabis Act to sell it legally. But there was one condition for obtaining a license: the store owner could not have a criminal record. So, once again, Weber used his old trick. He registered the store in the name of his wife, Michelle Cam. Around that time, CBC News conducted an investigative campaign into cannabis stores, discovering that the store registered under Michelle Cam's name was actually owned and financed by Weber, with Michelle listed only as a director. Weber's history of printing counterfeit notes was something that never stopped haunting him. Once again, his store license was cancelled, and he was sent to jail. This was the story of the man who created the finest counterfeit Canadian dollars and was caught because of one small foolish mistake. The fake bills were so good that police departments began using them in their training colleges, helping new officers learn to distinguish between real and counterfeit notes and understand how to prevent such fraud. How did you like this story? Write your thoughts in the comments section. Like, subscribe, and comment on the channel. See you in the next video.